Welcome, dear subscribers and curious listeners of my channel. 6 months ago, we already discussed the differences between book Hermione and her movie counterpart. But today, let's talk about the story's central figure himself. How much was Harry Potter changed when he was brought to the big screen? And why does the movie version sometimes look nothing like his literary original? Let's find out together. Number 1, a true Gryffindor. Let's begin with the most painful scene. The death of Dumbledore in Half-Blood Prince. In the film, Harry simply stands aside, silently watching as his mentor is killed. He trusts Snape, even though he's suspected the worst of him for years, and he doesn't even try to intervene. But book Harry would never behave like that. This is Potter. He would never stand idle while a friend or ally was dying in front of him. In the novel, Dumbledore himself immobilizes Harry under the invisibility cloak, so he won't interfere. Harry was ready to fight, but the spell held him back until the end. This is where Harry's true nature shines through. He is always ready to risk himself for others, and that essence was blurred in the adaptation. Number 2, emotions. Harry in the books is far more emotional than his cinematic double. Think of how he reacts to Sirius's death. In the movie, he merely has a quiet conversation with Dumbledore, holding back his grief. But in the book, Harry rages, smashes things, shouts, unable to cope with the pain and despair. Or his first kiss with Ginny. In the movie, the initiative belongs to her, and Harry just stands there waiting. In the book, he can't hold back. He kisses Ginny in front of the entire common room, forgetting the world around him. His emotions are raw and vivid. This impulsive, passionate Harry makes the story far more convincing than his silent, restrained film version. Number 3, a sharp mind, you say? In the books, Harry comes across as much more reasonable and far-sighted. In Order of the Phoenix, he doesn't rush headlong to save Sirius. He first tries to confirm whether his godfather is truly in danger. Only after speaking with Kreacher does he decide to act. During the Triwizard Tournament, he trains hard, learns spells, and prepares carefully, rather than relying solely on luck. Even his use of Felix Felicis is portrayed more wisely in the book. He drinks only part of it, sharing the rest with his friends to increase their survival chances. In the movie, however, he downs the entire bottle in one go. Book Harry often acts strategically and with foresight, while movie Harry looks more like an impulsive teenager living only in the moment. Number 4, the main hero. You'd think that since Harry is the central character, he should be the one driving the story forward. And in the books, that's exactly what happens. He digs into information about Nicholas Flamel, decides to put Fluffy to sleep, takes action after Cedric's death, investigating the truth about Voldemort. But in the films, things are different. Many of his initiatives are handed over to Hermione. Even the Gringotts' escape on the dragon, Harry's idea in the book, is attributed to Hermione on screen. This creates the impression that movie Harry isn't a leader, but merely a figure around whom things happen. Number 5, silence is golden. And finally, the most noticeable difference, Harry's everyday behavior. In the books, he's sharp, bold, and unafraid to argue even with those stronger than him. He snaps at the Dursleys, mocks Dudley, retorts to Malfoy, and even shows sarcasm towards Snape. In the films, however, he's far more quiet and passive. Take the letter scene. On screen, he just watches as Uncle Vernon grabs the envelope. But in the book, he furiously demands it back, shouts, argues, even tries to snatch it by force. The same goes for Hogwarts. From cheeky remarks to Malfoy to stubborn replies in potions class, the book version is fiery and outspoken. The movie version, on the other hand, often just stands by silently. Number 6, relationships with friends. In the books, Harry's bond with his friends is active and constant. He argues with Ron, debates with Hermione, and joins in their laughter. In Goblet of Fire, when Ron doubts him about the Triwizard Tournament, Harry's frustration bursts out, but so does his longing for reconciliation. "I didn't put my name in that goblet, you know I didn't," he insists. Moments like this show him not as a silent bystander, but as a boy who feels deeply and fights to be heard. His voice matters in the trio, and his friendship is not passive, it is lived. Quidditch brings out another side of this closeness. In Half-Blood Prince, Harry doesn't just play Seeker. He rallies his team, strategizes, and celebrates victories with them. "We're going to smash Slytherin," he tells Ginny and Demelza before a match, his confidence lifting the whole group. This leadership and emotional support never appear in the same way in the films. On screen, Harry seems like just a player on a broomstick. On the page, he is a friend, a captain, and a heartbeat of the team, proving that his place among his peers is far more than silent observation. Number 7. Doubts and weaknesses. In the books, Harry's doubts cut deep. In Order of the Phoenix, after a series of disturbing visions, he fears that Voldemort is inside him. "I'm the weapon," he tells Ron and Hermione, horrified at the thought that he might harm them. The fear drives him to isolate himself, pulling away from the very friends who give him strength. His silence at Grimmauld Place is not simple brooding. It is the desperate attempt of a boy to protect the people he loves from a danger he believes is himself. The films touch this only briefly. Harry looks angry or withdrawn, but the audience is never fully allowed into his mind. The book shows us a boy haunted by the possibility that he is no different from the Dark Lord, that he might be a danger rather than a savior. This inner battle makes his eventual choices to fight, to lead, to sacrifice more powerful. Without it, movie Harry seems like a flawless hero, while book Harry remains human, vulnerable, and painfully real. Number 8. Harry and his sense of humor. Book. Harry has a sharp tongue. He uses sarcasm like a shield even against teachers. In Half-Blood Prince, when Snape snaps at him for not addressing him properly, Harry cannot resist. "Yes," said Harry stiffly. "There's no need to call me Sir, Professor." The class gasps, Ron struggles not to laugh, and the moment shows Harry's wit, his bravery, and his refusal to be silenced. On screen, this line is missing, and with it, a piece of Harry's character. Humor also carries him through darker moments. In Order of the Phoenix, when Ron worries about exams and their training, Harry jokes. "Well, we've had a good run," said Harry gloomily. "If we're going to be killed by you-know-who, we might as well do it thoroughly." His words make his friends laugh, easing the tension that hangs over them. He is a boy facing death, yet still able to make others smile. That balance of courage and humor ties him to the memory of his father, James, who was known for his mischievous charm. The films rarely let this side of him shine. Harry becomes quieter, more solemn, almost stripped of the wit that makes him human. Without his biting remarks, his jokes in the face of danger, or his sly comebacks, movie, Harry feels less alive. The sarcastic boy who laughed through fear is replaced by a hero who speaks only when the plot demands it. Number 9. Attitude toward magic. In the books, Harry never loses his sense of wonder. When he first arrives at Diagon Alley, he stares at the shops with shining eyes, amazed at the sight of flying broomsticks and owls perched in cages. Harry wished he had about 8 more eyes, Rowling writes in Philosopher's Stone. That childlike awe never quite leaves him. Even years later, he is still eager to try out new spells, still fascinated by magical creatures, still curious about how the wizarding world works. The films strip away much of this excitement. Movie Harry walks through magical spaces as if they are just backgrounds. At Hogwarts, he attends lessons quietly, but rarely looks thrilled by what he sees. There is little of that wide-eyed amazement when he discovers a new charm or a magical artifact. The boy who once begged Hagrid to explain every detail of the wizarding world looks on screen like he has already grown tired of it all. Consider the firebolt. In Prisoner of Azkaban, when Harry finally receives the broom from Sirius, he is overwhelmed with joy. The book describes the firebolt in glowing detail, and Harry's exhilaration in flying it for the first time. In the movie, the moment is reduced to a quick scene, ending on a freeze frame of Harry's face. The depth of his happiness, his gratitude, his love of flying, all of it is rushed past. The sense of magic as wonder disappears. That difference makes the two versions of Harry feel worlds apart. In the novels, his awe connects the reader to the enchantment of the wizarding world, reminding us that magic is not just a tool, but a miracle. In the films, Harry treats it as routine, something practical and ordinary. Without his sense of wonder, the cinematic Harry becomes less human, less relatable, and far less magical. Number 10. Leader or follower. In the books, Harry steps into leadership naturally, even when he doubts himself. In Order of the Phoenix, when Umbridge takes over Hogwarts and bans proper defense against the dark arts, it is Harry who gathers students and trains them in secret. The group calls itself Dumbledore's Army, but it is Harry who teaches them spells, who inspires them, and who convinces them they are strong enough to fight back. "You're the best defense against the dark arts teacher we've ever had," Cho Chang tells him. These words prove that his classmates trusted him as their leader. The films cut away much of this. Dumbledore's army is shown, but it feels more like Hermione's idea and organization. Harry is present, yes, but his role is smaller, as if he only happened to be the one standing in front of the group. The sense of him being a teacher and motivator is almost gone. Instead, Hermione becomes the strategist, while Harry looks less like a leader and more like a symbol. There are other moments too. In Deathly Hallows, it is Harry who decides to break into Gringotts, climb onto the blind dragon, and escape with the Horcrux. The book gives him urgency and decisiveness. "Follow me!" he shouts as he pulls Hermione and Ron with him. His actions drive the story forward. In the movie, however, the idea is shifted to Hermione, who suggests the escape plan. Harry is left reacting rather than leading. This change matters. Book. Harry is not perfect, but he dares to choose. He rushes into danger, gathers allies, and carries the burden of responsibility. Movie Harry often looks like events simply happen around him. Without his moments of leadership, the trio feels unbalanced. Hermione as the brains, Ron as the heart, and Harry as little more than the face of destiny. The books remind us that he was more than that. He was the one who led them into the fire and gave them the courage to keep going. Number 11. Harry and studies. On screen, Harry looks like a boy drifting through classes. He slumps at his desk, barely answering questions, letting Hermione raise her hand again and again. The films reduce him to a quiet observer, as if his education is something happening around him, not to him. It leaves the impression that the chosen one is a poor student who relies entirely on luck and his friends. In the books, Harry is far more engaged. He throws himself into defense against the dark arts, mastering spells long before his classmates. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Lupin teaches him the Patronus charm, and Harry practices tirelessly. The text describes him staggering after failed attempts, then rising again. "Expecto Patronum!" he cried, again and again, until the silver stag burst forth. This is not the work of a lazy boy, but of someone determined to learn. Flying lessons also reveal his natural talent. Madame Hooch is startled at how easily Harry controls his broom, while Draco Malfoy struggles to keep up. In Philosopher's Stone, McGonagall witnesses his skill and immediately drafts him into the Gryffindor Quidditch team. Far from being careless, Harry treats the broom as an extension of himself, proving that when a subject excites him, he learns faster than anyone else. Even in potions, his weakest subject, Harry's true ability shines when he inherits the Half-Blood Prince's old textbook in Half-Blood Prince. Following the cryptic notes, he succeeds where he once failed. Harry had never mixed a potion so successfully before. The potion in his cauldron was exactly the right shade of turquoise. His improvement shows he isn't hopeless at all. With the right guidance and motivation, Harry becomes a strong, capable student something the films rarely bother to show. Number 12, Harry and Slytherin. The Sorting Hat never simply whispered to Harry, it wrestled with him. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, the hat made a shocking suggestion. You could be great, you know, it's all here in your head, and Slytherin will help you on the way to greatness, no doubt about that. The boy who had just escaped years of cruelty sat frozen. He wanted nothing to do with the house that had produced Voldemort. This moment planted a seed of fear in Harry. What if he was already too much like the Dark Lord? That fear only grew stronger when Harry discovered his ability to speak Parseltongue. In Chamber of Secrets, during the dueling club scene, he hissed at the snake to leave Justin Finch-Fletchley alone. But to the horrified onlookers, it looked as if Harry had urged the serpent to attack. The whispers started immediately. He's a Parselmouth, like you-know-who. Harry's stomach twisted. Could the Sorting Hat have been right? Throughout the books, Rowling returned again and again to Harry's doubt. He questioned himself when he saw visions through Voldemort's mind in Order of the Phoenix. He asked Dumbledore directly whether he might belong to Slytherin. The headmaster's answer was firm yet kind. It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities. Still, the unease lingered. Harry could never quite forget how easily the hat had tried to push him into Slytherin. In the films, this rich internal struggle is nearly erased. We hear the Sorting Hat mention Slytherin in passing, but the weight of Harry's dread is lost. His conversations with Dumbledore about choice and destiny are cut short. The audience never fully sees the boy who lay awake at night, terrified he shared the same darkness as Voldemort. Without this tension, movie Harry feels less human, less vulnerable, and the haunting shadow of Slytherin fades into nothing more than school rivalry. Number 13, the role of prophecy. In the films, the prophecy is treated as a mechanical device, a shortcut to move the story forward. The viewer hears Sybil Trelawney's trembling voice in the memory, sees Dumbledore gravely confirm that Harry is the chosen one, and from that moment the audience is expected to accept it as a fixed fact. There is little room for doubt, reflection, or philosophical questioning. Harry is chosen, Voldemort is his enemy, and the story proceeds like a train on a set of tracks. Yet in the books, J.K. Rowling lingers on the ambiguity. The prophecy becomes not an iron chain, but a mirror in which Harry constantly questions himself. Is he truly special, or is he simply a boy caught by chance in Voldemort's violent paranoia? The tension lies in the words of the prophecy itself, which Trelawney spoke in a trance before Dumbledore. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches, born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the seventh month dies. On paper, this could apply to more than one child. Neville Longbottom also fit the description, born in late July to parents who resisted Voldemort 3 times. This fact is almost ignored in the films, but in the books, it is a central revelation. Dumbledore explains to Harry that it was Voldemort's own decision to mark him as his equal that completed the prophecy. Thus, Harry is the chosen one, not because destiny etched it into stone, but because Voldemort acted in fear, narrowing the path with his own choices. It is in this nuance that the true weight of the prophecy lies. Harry's reaction to the prophecy in Order of the Phoenix shows his inner turmoil. After Sirius's death, when grief overwhelms him, he demands to know why his life must be tethered to Voldemort's. He feels crushed by the idea that he exists only to fulfill a grim line of prediction. "It means me," he cries in Dumbledore's office, devastated by the realization. Yet Dumbledore insists that it is not so simple. The prophecy does not dictate action, it merely opens a possibility. "It was your heart that saved you," Dumbledore tells him, reminding Harry that the power Voldemort never understood was love. The prophecy may have named him, but it is his compassion and loyalty that define him. This conversation entirely missing. From the film adaptation, is one of the most important philosophical turning points in the entire saga. The Harry of the books is not content to be told he is special. Again and again, he questions what it means. In Half-Blood Prince, when he confides in Dumbledore about the burden he feels, Dumbledore points out that it is not about being chosen, but about making choices. The prophecy did not say Harry must kill Voldemort. It said that one of them must die at the hands of the other, for neither can live while the other survives. In the films, this sounds like a cold verdict. In the books, Dumbledore reframes it. Harry could walk away if he wished. He has no magical shackle binding him. But Harry realizes he cannot walk away, not because he is compelled, but because his own heart will not let him abandon the people he loves. This subtle but powerful distinction between fate and choice is what elevates the books beyond mere adventure. Consider the moment in the Department of Mysteries in Order of the Phoenix. The prophecy orb is smashed during the battle with the Death Eaters. In the film, this feels almost irrelevant. The characters already know its contents. But in the book, the destruction of the orb symbolizes that words written in glass do not rule their lives. Even though the prophecy is gone, its implications still linger. Yet the knowledge survives in Dumbledore's memory, and he explains it to Harry not as an immutable law, but as something Voldemort's own actions created. This is a crucial difference. The shattering of the orb is like the shattering of inevitability. Destiny can be broken, choice remains. Rowling makes it clear that Harry is not stronger because of the prophecy, but in spite of it. His greatest acts of courage come not when he obeys some prediction, but when he follows his conscience. When he walks into the Forbidden Forest in Deathly Hallows, ready to sacrifice himself, he does not do it because a prophecy told him to. He does it because he loves Ron, Hermione, Ginny, and all the others who will die if Voldemort wins. His steps into the forest are driven by loyalty, not destiny. The films, however, flatten this moment into the role of a martyr fulfilling a script. The book shows the raw humanity of a boy who chooses death for love. The contrast becomes sharper when we look at Neville. In the book, Harry realizes that Neville could have been the one. This thought unsettles him deeply. If Voldemort had chosen differently, Neville might have carried the scar. Neville might have borne the weight of being the so-called chosen one. Harry recognizes that his life has been shaped not by divine decree, but by another man's decision. The film barely acknowledges this. Without that recognition, Harry's heroism seems less complex, less tinged with the understanding of chance and fragility. Rowling's narrative reminds us that heroism is not predestined, it is chosen. One of the most telling lines in the books comes when Dumbledore says to Harry in Half-Blood Prince, "It is the unknown we fear when we look upon death and darkness, nothing more." This lesson resonates with the prophecy. The unknown can terrify, but it is how one faces it that matters. The prophecy did not carve Harry's path. His willingness to face fear did. That is why his final confrontation with Voldemort is not a battle of brute force, but of moral clarity. He disarms, he spares, he stands firm. He does not kill for the sake of prophecy, but survives because he refuses to become like Voldemort. Number 14, Harry and Dumbledore. In the world of Harry Potter, one of the most fascinating dynamics lies between Harry himself and Albus Dumbledore. The way J.K. Rowling crafted this relationship on the page was layered, messy, and filled with moments of trust and betrayal. Yet when these same events were adapted for the big screen, much of the complexity was lost. What the films present is a picture of a wise old headmaster guiding a young hero, restrained and formal, but missing the storms of emotion that make the bond so compelling in the books. The omissions alter how audiences perceive not only Dumbledore's role, but Harry's growth as well. In Rowling's novels, Harry's admiration for Dumbledore is never simple. From the earliest pages, he views the headmaster as a figure larger than life, a man with immense power who always seems to know more than he lets on. Yet admiration soon grows into frustration. Harry experiences repeated moments where he feels deliberately kept in the dark, and these are not small irritations. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, when he returns to Hogwarts after the trauma of Cedric Diggory's death, he expects guidance. Instead, Dumbledore avoids him entirely. Rowling describes Harry's anger vividly. It was almost unbearable to be ignored by Dumbledore when all Harry wanted was to talk to him. This wound becomes central to the story, and when the truth finally emerges that Dumbledore has hidden the prophecy about Voldemort and Harry's fate, Harry explodes. The film adaptation, however, smooths over these sharp edges. Michael Gambon's Dumbledore maintains a distant air, and the filmmakers rarely show him avoiding Harry in any deliberate way. Instead, their interactions are clipped and factual. In Order of the Phoenix, the confrontation in Dumbledore's office is reduced to a quiet explanation rather than the storm that Rowling wrote. On the page, Harry smashes objects, shouts, and accuses the man he trusted most. He screams, "You knew! You knew all along and you never told me!" That raw eruption of grief and fury reveals a teenager grappling with betrayal. The absence of such intensity in the films transforms the dynamic into something far more simplistic, a teacher keeping calm authority over his pupil. Another striking example comes in Half-Blood Prince. In the novel, Harry and Dumbledore spend extended time together in private lessons. These chapters allow Rowling to deepen the connection between them. Harry sees memories of Voldemort's past, learns to trust Dumbledore's judgment, and begins to appreciate the full scope of what is at stake. Yet even here, he questions and doubts. After discovering that Dumbledore has known about the Horcruxes longer than he admitted, Harry feels once again the sting of being withheld from. Rowling writes, "Harry was angry with Dumbledore. He could not help it. Why had he not been told sooner?" These lessons build a relationship closer to that of father and son than teacher and student, filled with admiration, reliance, and constant tension. The film adaptation, however, treats these crucial lessons as brief exchanges. The pensive journeys are shown but stripped of much detail, and Harry's doubts are left unspoken. Their relationship is reduced to quick missions rather than the drawn-out mentorship Rowling envisioned. The absence of emotional conflict means that when Dumbledore dies at the end of Half-Blood Prince, the cinematic audience mourns a great man, but the grief lacks the sting of unfinished conversations and withheld truths that the readers feel. Even earlier, in Goblet of Fire, the contrast is glaring. In the book, when Harry's name emerges from the goblet, Dumbledore is shocked but supportive. He trusts Harry's word that he did not enter himself, and this trust reinforces Harry's loyalty to him. Rowling is clear that Dumbledore's voice is calm, deliberate, reassuring. "Did you put your name into the Goblet of Fire, Harry?" she writes calmly. Yet in the film the moment is famously distorted. Dumbledore storms toward Harry, gripping him and demanding answers with visible anger. This shift alters everything. Instead of showing a mentor who believes in his student, the film portrays suspicion and confrontation. For many viewers, that moment defined their image of Dumbledore, but it contradicts the foundation Rowling had built. Rowling also uses Harry's anger toward Dumbledore to explore grief itself. After Sirius Black's death, Harry is consumed by rage. In Order of the Phoenix, he nearly blames Dumbledore outright, believing his isolation and manipulation led to the tragedy. "It's your fault Sirius died," he yells, and though he later regrets the words, the scene demonstrates how much pressure sits on their bond. This tension allows readers to witness the complicated way grief twists trust and love. By softening these conflicts in the films, the adaptation robs Harry's journey of one of its most human elements, the messy fight to reconcile love with disappointment. There are also subtler moments in the novels that never make it to screen. In Prisoner of Azkaban, when Harry learns the truth about Sirius, he looks to Dumbledore for validation and help. Dumbledore listens, but he does not intervene to save Sirius immediately. Harry feels helpless, frustrated, and yet still clings to the hope that Dumbledore will fix things. Rowling builds a pattern of Harry seeing Dumbledore as both saviour and source of pain. By cutting or diluting these moments, the films leave audiences with a flatter image. The cinematic Dumbledore is more consistent, but consistency was never the point in Rowling's portrayal. Number 15, The Final Battle. In the book version of the final confrontation, the Great Hall is heavy with silence as Harry faces Voldemort. The eyes of hundreds of witnesses, students, professors, members of the Order are on them. It is not just a battle between two wizards, but the culmination of years of fear and resistance. Rowling makes this clear through description, showing how Voldemort's presence has always suffocated the wizarding world, and now every breath taken in that hall is a collective hope that his reign will end. The film, however, strips this away. The crowded hall is absent, and the duel is turned into a chase across Hogwarts grounds, with Harry and Voldemort battling in deserted corridors and courtyards. It makes for striking images, but it loses the communal weight of the moment. Readers of the book understand that the crowd's presence is essential. Voldemort's defeat is not a secret act in the shadows, but a public unmasking of tyranny. The duel itself in the film transforms Voldemort into a kind of action villain. His robes swirl, his magic crackles with visual energy, and his death becomes a cinematic spectacle as he crumbles into ash and scatters into the wind. This image, though powerful on screen, is empty compared to the layered conclusion Rowling wrote. In the novel, Voldemort's body remains after his fall. It is described as ordinary, even pitiful. His body lay there, shrunken, and the snake-like face was vacant and unknowing. This detail matters. Death does not glorify Voldemort, nor does it make him seem mystical. Instead, it reminds the reader that even the most feared wizard is still mortal. His body being there for everyone to see is symbolic of the end of myth and terror. He is not a phantom dispersed in smoke, but a man who made fatal choices. Harry's victory in the book is not sudden or mysterious. It is explained. Rowling gives Harry the space to reveal why Voldemort cannot win. He tells him about the Elder Wand, the fatal flaw in Voldemort's arrogance. "The wand's allegiance was never yours," Harry proclaims, showing that mastery of power is about understanding rather than brute force. The duel is intellectual as much as magical. Readers witness Voldemort's plans unravel not through Harry's spell strength, but through his knowledge and his ability to see beyond fear. The film omits this. It reduces the duel to wand. Blasts colliding mid-air with no clear explanation for why Voldemort's killing curse rebounds. For someone who has not read the books, the reasoning behind his downfall is blurred into confusion. The presence of the crowd in the Great Hall during the book's climax also emphasizes the themes of loyalty and sacrifice. Neville Longbottom's bravery, Molly Weasley's duel with Bellatrix, the combined efforts of house elves and centaurs, all of these threads converge to make the victory possible. The final battle is not just Harry against Voldemort, but an army of hearts united against oppression. When Harry confronts Voldemort, it is with the knowledge that he carries not only his own courage, but also the sacrifices of Fred Weasley, Remus Lupin, Tonks, and countless others. The movie isolates Harry, and by doing so it isolates the meaning of the fight. The book insists Voldemort fell because many stood together. The most haunting element of the book's ending is Harry's explanation of sacrifice. He tells Voldemort about his walk into the forest, about how he allowed himself to die so that his friends could live. "I was ready to die to stop you from hurting these people," he thinks. And the protective magic born from his act echoes the magic of his mother's sacrifice years before. This is central. Voldemort cannot understand love or sacrifice, and it is precisely what makes him weak. The film never allows Harry to voice this truth. It prefers the thunder of clashing spells. By removing the explanation, the adaptation loses the philosophy at the heart of the story. The book ensures Voldemort's defeat feels inevitable, not by force but by character. Harry has grown into someone who recognizes that power without compassion collapses upon itself. Voldemort, consumed by fear of death, seeks control at all costs. The Elder Wand refuses him because power, in Rowling's universe, respects wisdom and humility more than violence. The moment Voldemort realizes his mistake in the book is one of chilling silence. There is no explosion of light, no cinematic flourish. His curse rebounds and he dies a man who never understood the very forces he sought to master. It is the perfect literary punishment, ignorance leading to downfall. There is also a symbolic resonance in the fact that Harry does not kill Voldemort with the killing curse. Instead, he uses Expelliarmus, the spell that has defined him from the beginning. This choice underlines Harry's consistency of character. He wins not by becoming a mirror of Voldemort, but by staying true to himself. In the book, Rowling highlights this moment. It was Harry's spell against Voldemort's, and the disarming charm prevails over the curse of death. The film, while showing Harry using this spell, never underscores its thematic importance. To the untrained eye, it looks like just another exchange of magic beams. The communal response after Voldemort's death is another striking difference. In the book, there is a release of tension, a sense of relief and disbelief. People weep, cheer, cling to each other. The atmosphere feels human and raw. Harry, exhausted, seeks no glory. He withdraws quietly, not basking in triumph. In the film, Harry and Voldemort tumble dramatically off a tower and crash through the air, and when Voldemort disintegrates, there's no eruption of relief in the hall. The emotional closure is muted, leaving the scene strangely hollow compared to the pages that gave fans decades of catharsis. Number 16. Harry and family. In the films, Harry Potter's life with the Dursleys is often reduced to a caricature, a sequence of short comic scenes in which Vernon growls, Dudley complains, and Petunia glares with disdain. The audience is left with the impression that Harry's years in Privet Drive were unpleasant, but almost light-hearted, filled with more slapstick than sorrow. Yet in the books, J.K. Rowling paints a very different picture. Harry's existence at number 4 is not just uncomfortable, it is defined by loneliness, hunger, emotional neglect, and the persistent ache of a boy who longs for the warmth of a family he never had. This difference shapes how we understand Harry, and it is in the written pages, not the silver screen, that his tragedy becomes clear. When Harry is introduced in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, the reader is confronted with an image far bleaker than anything the movies attempt to show. Harry sleeps not in a proper bedroom, but in a cupboard under the stairs, and this cramped space becomes a symbol of his invisibility in the Dursley household. The films touch on this fact, but only fleetingly, presenting the cupboard as a humorous quirk. In the book, however, we learn that Harry grows up without birthday parties, without photographs of himself on the walls, and without a single expression of parental affection. Petunia and Vernon reserve their indulgence for Dudley, who counts his presence with greedy satisfaction, while Harry sits quietly in the background, a ghost in his own home. This is no comic exaggeration, it is the daily humiliation of a child denied recognition. The books also dwell on Harry's emotional responses in ways the films almost entirely omit. In The Chamber of Secrets, when Dobby appears in his bedroom, Harry admits how desperate he is to return to Hogwarts, because for him, Hogwarts is not simply a school, but a sanctuary from the suffocating cruelty of Privet Drive. "I've got to go back," he insists, and it is not a matter of academics, but survival. Rowling makes it clear that Harry's yearning is not only for magical adventures, but for belonging. The films show him exasperated or annoyed with the Dursleys, but rarely heartbroken. In truth, his entire childhood is an unending search for connection, a desperate grasp for fragments of family. Wherever he can find them, perhaps the most striking difference lies in how the books reveal Harry's longing for his parents. In The Philosopher's Stone, when Harry stumbles upon the Mirror of Erised, he does not only see James and Lily, he experiences the devastating temptation of feeling their presence. Rowling writes, he had a powerful kind of ache inside him, half joy, half terrible sadness. This is a moment of profound emotional weight, for it shows that Harry does not just want freedom from the Dursleys, he wants the embrace of the family he was robbed of. The film includes the mirror, but the depth of his obsession, the way he returns night after night until Dumbledore gently warns him away, is glossed over. On the page, the tragedy lingers like a shadow over his heart. That ache returns in The Prisoner of Azkaban, where Harry learns that Sirius Black, the supposed murderer, is in fact his godfather. When Sirius offers him a home, Rowling captures Harry's reaction with simple words that convey enormous emotion. "Are you insane?" Harry asks in disbelief, before his thoughts race ahead to the idea of escaping Privet Drive forever. A home, he thinks, as if it were the most miraculous of gifts. In the film, this exchange is brief, almost rushed. In the book, it is a turning point in Harry's life, the moment when hope of true family first flickers. The films rarely allow this longing to breathe, and so the audience misses how deeply Harry's identity is shaped by his hunger for kinship. Even in casual references, the books underline Harry's grief in ways that films choose not to explore. In The Order of the Phoenix, when Professor Snape taunts him about his father, Harry feels both fury and vulnerability. His defense of James is not merely pride, but a child's desperate attempt to hold on to a father he never knew. Similarly, in The Goblet of Fire, when Harry faces Voldemort in the graveyard and the shades of his parents emerge from the wand, Rowling lingers on the poignancy of their encouragement. Lily tells him, "You are loved." These words carry an almost unbearable weight, for they are what Harry has longed to hear since infancy. On screen, the moment is rushed by the pace of battle. In the novel, it is an emotional climax, the boy meeting his parents' gaze, even if only for seconds. The Dursleys themselves are given more depth in the books, a fact often overlooked when comparing the two mediums. Aunt Petunia, for instance, is revealed in The Order of the Phoenix to know far more about the wizarding world than she admits. Her rigid cruelty is rooted not only in jealousy, but in the painful reminder that her sister Lily was chosen for a world Petunia could never enter. When she shouts, "You think I don't know what they're capable of?" we glimpse her bitterness and grief. In the films, Petunia is mostly reduced to shrill scolding and disapproving looks. By stripping her of nuance, the films also strip Harry's home life of the complexity that deepens his tragedy. Another crucial detail from the books is Harry's physical suffering at Privet Drive. He is not simply ignored, he is underfed. In The Philosopher's Stone, Rowling writes that Harry often goes to bed hungry, receiving only Dudley's leftovers. His small size, noted repeatedly by teachers, is not just genetics, but the consequence of neglect. When Dudley boasts about his meals, Harry silently endures. The films rarely allude to this hunger, choosing instead to focus on magical escapades. Yet for readers, Harry's gauntness and empty stomach are reminders that his battle for survival began long before Voldemort reappeared. This neglect explains why Harry is so drawn to surrogate families throughout the series. The Weasleys, with their chaotic kitchen and knitted jumpers, provide him with warmth he never knew. When Mrs. Weasley hugs him for the first time, Harry is startled because affection is alien to him. In the books, his reaction is tender and moving. In the films, it is simply one moment among many. The written Harry clings to these scraps of family love with desperate gratitude, and the reader understands that every Christmas at the Burrow, every birthday cake is more than a treat. It is a healing of wounds inflicted by years of neglect. Rowling also shows how Harry's longing for family becomes entangled with grief as he grows older. In The Half-Blood Prince, when Dumbledore speaks to him about Lily's protection, Harry listens with fierce concentration because every detail about his mother is precious. The films summarize these conversations, but the books dwell on Harry's inner silence, the way he turns each word over in his mind as if polishing a rare jewel. These moments are not only about plot, but about Harry's desperate effort to assemble fragments of his parents into something whole. Even Harry's relationship with Dudley is given more weight in the books than in the films. Their final meeting in the Deathly Hallows, where Dudley awkwardly acknowledges that Harry saved him from the Dementors, is understated but powerful. Dudley mutters, "I don't think you're a waste of space." For Harry, who endured years of Dudley's bullying, these words are shocking in their sincerity. Rowling leaves the reader with the sense that even in the most barren soil, a seed of reconciliation can grow. The films cut this moment entirely, and with it, the chance to show that Harry's family story, while tragic, is not without flickers of healing. The absence of these layers in the films alters how viewers perceive Harry. On screen, he appears heroic and determined, but the deeper wounds of his childhood are blurred. In the books, however, every action Harry takes, his loyalty to friends, his courage in facing Voldemort, his insistence on fighting for love, is rooted in the emptiness left by the Dursleys' rejection and the death of his parents. His triumphs are not just victories over evil, but victories over despair. Without the context of his loneliness, the films flatten Harry into a typical hero's arc, missing the poignancy that makes him unforgettable. One might argue that cinema, bound by time, cannot capture every nuance, yet the choices the films make often replace Harry's grief with humour. Dudley's pig's tail is played for laughs, while Harry's long nights in the cupboard are barely mentioned. Viewers miss the ache of the boy who stared out of his window, imagining parents he could not remember, or the trembling joy when he discovers people who loved him. These omissions matter because they transform the essence of Harry's character from a child defined by longing into one defined primarily by action. In the end, it is the books that preserve the heart of Harry's story. The Dursleys are not simply comical villains, but the embodiment of neglect and lovelessness. James and Lily are not just symbols of sacrifice, but the absent parents whose memory fuels their son's every step. And Harry himself is not only a chosen hero, but a lonely boy who, even in victory, carries the scars of a childhood without love. The tragedy of Harry Potter is not just the scar on his forehead, but the emptiness in his heart, an emptiness the films touch lightly, but the books explore with devastating honesty. Number 17, Hidden Thoughts. The films about Harry Potter gave audiences a spectacular journey through castles, Quidditch matches, and duels of light and darkness. Yet in their beauty and cinematic energy, something profound was lost, the voice inside Harry's head. In the books, this voice is not merely a collection of fleeting thoughts. It is the central stage on which his fears, suspicions, hopes, and misunderstandings play out. The inner monologues define Harry not only as a boy fighting evil, but as a fragile human being, doubting every step. When those thoughts are removed, as happens in the films, the audience is left with a simplified version of a complex hero, one whose psychology remains hidden behind action scenes and determined looks. The difference becomes striking when one reads Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. In the novel, Harry is angry, frustrated, and often consumed by the strange pull of his connection with Voldemort. His emotions are unpredictable. At one moment he is overwhelmed with guilt over Cedric Diggory's death. At another he is seething at Ron and Hermione for what he perceives as betrayal. The book allows us to see these conflicting emotions erupt within him. Rowling writes, "The injustice of it all welled up inside him so that he wanted to yell with fury." That single sentence reveals an ocean of pain under the surface. In the film, however, Daniel Radcliffe's Harry shows anger, but the camera cannot follow the inner storm. We only see clenched fists and darkened eyes, but not the tortured reflections that gave the anger its depth. Consider the haunting dreams that plague Harry throughout Order of the Phoenix. In the book, these visions are not simple flashes of serpents and corridors. They come layered with dread and confusion. Harry questions himself constantly. Why does he feel satisfaction when Voldemort is pleased? Why does he wake up drenched in sweat with an overwhelming sense of guilt? Rowling's narration takes us inside the boy's terror. He was Voldemort, and he was laughing, his cold, high laugh mingling with the man's moans of pain. In those passages, Harry questions whether he is becoming the Dark Lord. On screen, the dreams become cinematic sequences, disturbing, yes, but stripped of Harry's internal dialogue. The psychological thriller element is replaced by a fantasy montage, and so the viewer misses the dangerous intimacy of Harry's connection with evil. This absence of thought makes the Harry of the films seem like a traditional adventure hero. He fights bravely, suffers loss, and perseveres. But in the books, Harry is far from that stereotype. He is paranoid, suspicious even of Dumbledore, the one figure he always trusted. The novel emphasizes Harry's growing sense of abandonment, describing how Dumbledore avoids his gaze and how Harry interprets that as rejection. The line, "Dumbledore doesn't want to look at me," is repeated in Harry's thoughts like a wound he keeps pressing. It is a psychological note of isolation. The film shows Dumbledore turning away, but without Harry's repeated suspicion and resentment, the sense of betrayal feels thinner, almost accidental. One medium offers us a mind unraveling, the other only a moment of awkward distance. The gap between books and films widens in the Department of Mysteries sequence. In Rowling's novel, the heart of the battle is not only wands and spells, it is Harry's unshakable conviction that Sirius is suffering behind the veil, a conviction fed by his inner visions. He ignores Hermione's warnings because his mind screams with certainty. Rowling writes, he could still hear the voice whispering, entreating. It was Sirius's voice. The tragedy of Sirius's death only pierces so deep because we have followed Harry's mistaken reasoning every step of the way. In the film, the rescue mission comes across more as a straightforward trap. The audience knows from the outside that Harry was lured. We do not feel the heartbreaking weight of his personal mistake because we were never inside the doubt that guided him there. Another telling contrast comes earlier, during Harry's anger at Ron and Hermione when they are made prefects. In the book, his rage is not only jealousy but despair at being excluded yet again. Rowling writes, he had expected a reward, and instead he felt left behind. These words reveal the lonely boy under the scarred hero, craving recognition. In the film adaptation, this scene is barely addressed. Without the long interior passages, Harry's bitterness seems like a short temper rather than the deep wound of a child who has been set apart all his life. The viewer sees an argument, while the reader feels a confession of hidden pain. The contrast also alters how we perceive Harry's relationship with Cho Chang. In the book, their fragile romance is suffused with his insecurity and constant overthinking. After their awkward kiss in the room of requirement, Harry spends pages analyzing what it meant, wondering whether he should have said something different. He frets over her tears, not knowing how to comfort her. His immaturity and nervous thoughts make the relationship painfully real. In the film, the kiss happens, sweet and brief, but the aftermath is largely absent. The boy's insecure musings vanish, replaced with the appearance of confidence. Thus, the film Harry seems older, calmer, and less vulnerable than the deeply uncertain character on the page. Even smaller moments show the power of inner thought. When Umbridge punishes Harry with the blood quill, the book reveals his stubborn internal mantra. I must not tell lies. The pain is described alongside his determination, his refusal to scream. These passages reveal courage not as cinematic endurance, but as a war inside his head, fought against breaking down. On screen, the punishment is shown visually, the scar forming on his hand, but the audience cannot hear the relentless battle of thoughts that make the scene heroic. It becomes spectacle rather than a psychological crucible. Harry's nightmares in Order of the Phoenix culminate in his vision of Arthur Weasley's attack. In the novel, the horror is intensified by Harry's conviction that he himself had bitten Mr. Weasley because he experienced the attack from the serpent's perspective. He wakes trembling, horrified at his own body being the instrument of violence. The line, "It was me, I was the snake," echoes throughout the chapter. That self-condemnation drives Harry to believe he is a danger to his friends. The film presents the attack vividly, but without his tormented self-recrimination, it feels more like a supernatural warning than a psychological collapse. The viewer sees a prophecy, not a boy's terror that he might be a monster. These omissions matter because they alter the story's meaning. In the books, Harry's journey is as much about mastering his inner fears as it is about defeating Voldemort. His greatest struggle is often with his own thoughts: anger, guilt, suspicion, and self-doubt. When those are cut away, the films present a cleaner tale of good versus evil, but they lose the coming-of-age narrative of a boy grappling with himself. The depth of his humanity is thinned to the surface of heroism. The later books only highlight this difference. In Half-Blood Prince, Harry spends months wrestling with the question of Draco Malfoy's loyalties. His inner obsession with following Malfoy, imagining plots, and convincing others consumes his mind. The reader walks alongside every suspicion, every whispered doubt. In the film, this obsession is condensed into a few glances and confrontations. Without the constant hum of paranoia, the dramatic revelation of Draco's mission lacks the tension it had in the novel, where we knew Harry's thoughts might be dismissed as childish fantasy or might be horrifyingly true. Similarly, in Deathly Hallows, Harry's painful doubt about Dumbledore's past is a central thread. In the book, he questions whether the man he trusted may have supported dark ideals in youth. He reads Rita Skeeter's biography and turns the words over and over in his mind, shaken by the possibility of betrayal. Rowling describes his heart sinking as he wonders, did Dumbledore really care for me, or was I just a pawn? That question defines Harry's emotional state. In the film, Skeeter's book is mentioned, but the inner wrestling vanishes. The film, Harry remains resolute. While the book, Harry walks through a swamp of doubt. One is a hero certain of his quest, the other is a boy wondering if his very mission rests on a lie. The silence of the films is not accidental. Cinema struggles with inner monologues and voiceovers often feel heavy-handed, yet the loss of Harry's secret thoughts reshapes the narrative itself. Without his mind, the story becomes external: battles, friendships, betrayals, while the books remind us that the fiercest battles are invisible, fought in solitude. We are invited to inhabit the mind of a child burdened with destiny, and we feel every wound that does not bleed. The essence of Harry Potter lies in that interior struggle. Rowling's words give us access to a soul constantly doubting, questioning, fearing, and hoping. The films, for all their magic and grandeur, offer us the outline of that soul but not its full depth. We watch Harry fight. In the books, we fight with him, inside his very thoughts, and it is in those thoughts, raw, unguarded, often painful, that the true hero is revealed. Number 18, Harry and Justice. Harry Potter's character in J.K. Rowling's novels is not defined only by his fame as the boy who lived or his role in the great battle against Voldemort. What makes him extraordinary is his instinctive defense of those who are weaker, marginalized, or unfairly treated. The novels highlight time and again that his courage extends far beyond dueling Death Eaters. It appears in classrooms, common rooms, and corridors, where his refusal to look away from injustice defines him. The films, in condensing and streamlining the plot, often strip these moments away, leaving a portrait of Harry dominated by epic battles rather than small, meaningful choices. As a result, audiences who know him only through cinema see a hero of destiny, while readers encounter a boy who consciously chooses justice at every turn. One of the earliest and most telling examples comes in Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, when Harry befriends Neville Longbottom. Neville, clumsy and insecure, is frequently mocked by Draco Malfoy and even by some members of Gryffindor. In the book, Harry consistently encourages him, showing empathy that others neglect. Later, when Malfoy hexes Neville in the corridor, leaving him unable to move his legs, Harry immediately challenges Malfoy. He does not hesitate even though he risks confrontation with a boy backed by wealth and influence. This act, small on the surface, demonstrates Harry's instinct to defend those who cannot defend themselves. In the film, this moment is erased. Neville becomes mostly comic relief until the final battle, where his bravery is suddenly emphasized. Without the groundwork from earlier books, film audiences lose the slow, steady arc of Harry uplifting him. Another vital thread appears in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, where Harry openly supports Luna Lovegood. Luna is the quintessential outsider, ridiculed for her odd beliefs and dreamy demeanor. When others dismiss her as loony, Harry makes a different choice. He speaks with her respectfully, defends her presence within Dumbledore's army, and even consoles her after her possessions are stolen. He tells her, "You're just as sane as I am." This simple statement carries immense weight because Harry validates her identity when others dismiss her as delusional. The films, however, reduce this relationship to a few scattered moments, particularly her comforting words to Harry after Sirius's death. By minimizing Harry's consistent loyalty to Luna, the films overlook his pattern of defending those on the margins of Hogwarts society. Harry's sense of justice also comes into sharp focus in his confrontations with authority figures. In Chamber of Secrets, when Professor Snape attempts to accuse Harry of wrongdoing after a suspicious incident, Harry refuses to cower. He speaks up boldly, knowing that keeping silent would let Snape's unfair version of events dominate. Similarly, in Goblet of Fire, when Rita Skeeter writes damaging articles portraying Harry as unhinged, he resists the temptation to hide, and instead continues speaking the truth, despite how much it costs him socially. The films simplify these struggles, often transforming them into background tension rather than deeply personal moments. Viewers miss how Harry becomes a beacon for other students because of his refusal to bow to injustice, even when it comes from teachers or the press. Perhaps one of the clearest differences between book and film lies in Harry's defense of house elves. In Goblet of Fire, when Hermione launches SPEW, most of their friends laugh at her obsession. Harry, though less zealous, still treats house elves with respect, particularly Dobby. He listens to Dobby's struggles, offers him kindness, and never exploits his loyalty. In Order of the Phoenix, he refuses to insult Kreacher, even when Kreacher's hostility provokes others. Rowling crafts Harry as someone who instinctively resists systems of exploitation, even if he does not lead crusades. The films, however, erase SPEW entirely, reducing the house elves' role and diminishing Harry's subtle but critical respect for them. The cinematic version of Harry rarely shows this moral instinct, making him appear reactive rather than actively principled. Another striking episode occurs in Order of the Phoenix, when Harry publicly defends Hagrid after the Ministry undermines him. Hagrid, half-giant and already mistrusted, becomes a target for Dolores Umbridge's campaign. When students mock Hagrid or question his worth, Harry is one of the few who openly voices his loyalty. He stands by Hagrid's teaching even when the lessons are dangerous, because he understands that prejudice, not incompetence, drives Hagrid's persecution. In the film adaptation, Hagrid's dismissal feels abrupt and Harry's unwavering defense is barely shown. What vanishes is the moral texture, Harry risking his own reputation to defend a marginalized figure against institutional cruelty. Rowling also gives Harry moments of direct confrontation with injustice in the classroom. In Order of the Phoenix, he openly challenges Umbridge's denial of Voldemort's return. His anger erupts and he shouts, "He killed Cedric Diggory and you know it!" This moment is not only about grief, but about defending the truth against authoritarian lies. The film includes the outburst, but its framing diminishes the depth of Harry's defiance. In the novel, it sparks weeks of punishment, isolation, and ridicule, yet Harry never retracts his words. This stubborn insistence on truth, even at personal cost, is one of the strongest testaments to his sense of justice. The film, rushing to the next dramatic beat, loses the endurance and persistence behind his protest. An overlooked element in the films is Harry's defense of Severus Snape, despite years of enmity. In Deathly Hallows, after learning Snape's true allegiance, Harry insists to his son Albus that Snape was one of the bravest men he ever knew. This recognition stems from Harry's long pattern of reassessing and honoring those who were treated unfairly, even if he disliked them personally. The films show Harry naming his son after Snape, but without the layered history of his earlier choices, the moment feels abrupt. In the novels, it is the culmination of years of Harry recognizing injustice and paying respect to those who bore it. Harry's defense of the weak also shapes his friendships. His loyalty to Ron and Hermione, though often tested, springs from his ability to forgive and support them when they falter. In Prisoner of Azkaban, when Hermione is ridiculed for reporting Harry's firebolt to Professor McGonagall, Harry eventually understands her reasoning and restores their friendship. His forgiveness demonstrates not only emotional maturity but also fairness. The films show the tension but fail to highlight Harry's active choice to value justice over pride. It is this deliberate restoration of relationships that underscores his commitment to what is right, not simply what is easy. The books also show Harry repeatedly defending Muggle-borns. In Chamber of Secrets, when Draco sneers at Hermione as a mudblood, Harry's fury is immediate and unrestrained. He recognizes the cruelty of blood prejudice and refuses to let it pass in silence. Later, in Deathly Hallows, Harry chooses to use Voldemort aloud despite the danger it poses because he refuses to bow to fear and prejudice. These choices illustrate his deeper philosophy. Justice requires naming evil plainly. In the films, these threads exist only in fragments, without the relentless repetition that builds Harry's moral backbone. A poignant moment comes in Half-Blood Prince when Harry supports Draco Malfoy after discovering the burden placed on him by Voldemort. Though Draco has been his rival for years, Harry shows compassion in the final confrontation on the Astronomy Tower. He prevents others from killing Draco, recognizing that Draco himself is a victim. Rowling's Harry is able to extend his defense even to former enemies, understanding that justice is not vengeance. The film shows the duel and tension, but not Harry's quiet reflection and pity afterward. Without it, the audience misses Harry's capacity to extend fairness to those who do not deserve it on the surface. The novels also emphasize Harry's rejection of favoritism. When he becomes captain of the Gryffindor Quidditch team in Half-Blood Prince, he chooses players based on merit, even when it costs him socially. His fairness in team selection earns him criticism, but Harry refuses to bend the rules for friends. Rowling uses sport, a seemingly small arena, to highlight Harry's consistency. Justice matters even in the details. The film adaptations condense Quidditch heavily, erasing these subtle but telling choices. In doing so, they miss another chance to show Harry as someone who practices fairness even outside the battlefield. Harry's defense of others often comes with personal sacrifice. In Prisoner of Azkaban, he risks expulsion by sneaking into Hogsmeade without permission, but his true motivation is not rebellion. He wants to protect Sirius, believing him a murderer by gathering information. Even when Harry misunderstands, his instinct is to act on behalf of someone vulnerable. His choices rarely serve only his interests. The films, eager to maintain pace, often portray his risks as adventure rather than sacrifice. The absence of his deeper reasoning dulls the moral edge of his actions. Rowling's portrayal of Harry's sense of justice is cumulative. Small acts, defending Neville in the corridor, respecting house elves, standing by Luna, layer upon each other until the reader sees not only a warrior against Voldemort, but a defender of dignity in every corner of his world. The films, with their emphasis on cinematic spectacle, flatten this complexity. Audiences see Harry as brave, but may miss that he is also fair, compassionate, and loyal in ways unrelated to destiny. The difference is striking. The novels give us a boy who chooses justice again and again, while the films leave us primarily with the chosen one, whose battles overshadow his smaller victories for truth and kindness. Number 19, magical duelist. In the films, Harry Potter is often portrayed as a boy carried forward by destiny, luck, or the sacrifices of his friends, but the books tell a far richer story of a duelist constantly tested and forced to invent solutions on the fly. His dueling is not polished elegance, nor the practiced precision of a trained aura, but rather the raw survival of a teenager who has grown up with danger as his constant shadow. In the pages, Rowling shows us Harry's instincts, his quick decision-making, and the almost reckless courage that make him a fighter unlike any other. The films sometimes flatten this complexity into brief flashes of wand light, but the novels invite the reader to see how Harry becomes the very definition of a Gryffindor, brave, resourceful, and unwilling to bow to fear. When Harry faces Draco Malfoy in Chamber of Secrets during the dueling club scene, the film reduces the exchange to a brief sequence, more spectacle than substance, but the book lingers on Harry's reactions. He does not crumble before Malfoy's smug confidence. Instead, when Snape urges Draco to strike first, Harry's instincts sharpen. The book notes, Harry dodged and shouted, "Rictus Sempra!" The tickling charm may not be lethal, but it is disarming in its unpredictability, showing that Harry does not think in rigid categories of offensive and defensive magic. This spontaneity contrasts with the film version, where spells are exchanged quickly, leaving little impression of Harry's creativity under pressure. It is in the novel that the duel becomes evidence of Harry's ability to turn even simple charms into weapons of survival. The Triwizard Tournament reveals another facet of Harry's dueling talent that the films largely compress into visual set pieces. In the second task, when confronted by Grindylows underwater, Harry does not panic. He remembers Lupin's lessons on dealing with dark creatures, twisting that knowledge into quick action. Later, in the third task, when he faces obstacles in the maze, the book allows us to feel the constant pressure of adapting to danger. When Cedric is attacked by Crumb under the Imperious Curse, Harry intervenes without hesitation, shouting "Stupefy!" and putting himself between Cedric and Crumb. The film reduces this confrontation to mere glimpses of action, but the novel makes clear that Harry has grown into a duelist capable of recognizing danger instantly and striking decisively. This pattern, the book showing Harry as inventive and steady under fire, the films portraying him more as a reactor to chaos, is a consistent divide. Perhaps the clearest difference emerges in the Department of Mysteries in Order of the Phoenix. The film stages this as a frantic chase, with Death Eaters sweeping through the rooms while Harry and his friends scatter. The book, however, is explicit in Harry's leadership and dueling grit. He barks instructions, coordinates with Hermione and Neville, and throws spells with both precision and improvisation. Rowling writes, Harry had no idea what spell he had shouted, but a jet of light shot from his wand and knocked a Death Eater sideways. Even in confusion, he finds ways to press the fight. When Dolohov attacks Hermione, Harry reacts instantly, stunning his opponent and dragging his friend to safety. The film simplifies the encounter into chaotic flashes of light, but the book shows Harry as the center of a desperate defense, dueling not as a lone hero, but as someone who keeps his allies alive with his quick thinking. The duel with Voldemort in the graveyard of Goblet of Fire also reveals this divide. The movie focuses on the visual spectacle of the Priori Incantatem effect, wands locked in a beam of golden light, the spirits of Harry's parents appearing around him. Yet the book builds the tension before that moment by showing Harry's refusal to collapse. He is terrified, but he forces himself to act. Rowling describes he was going to die. It was just a question of how, yet he was still fighting, still thinking, still holding his wand tight. This detail is critical. Harry, even when hopeless, still duels. He buys himself time, he improvises, and his survival is not mere luck, but the fruit of sheer refusal to surrender. The cinematic version gives us spectacle, but the literary version shows us the heart of Harry's dueling spirit. Snape's duel with Harry after Dumbledore's death in Half-Blood Prince is another example of the difference. The film shows Harry hurling curses only for Snape to block them effortlessly, emphasizing Harry's weakness. The book, however, provides nuance. Harry is exhausted, injured, and emotionally destroyed, but he still fights. He tries curse after curse, some blocked, some dodged, and his determination becomes the real measure of his strength. Snape, in fact, scolds him, "You dare use my own spells against me, Potter?" The moment underlines that Harry has absorbed knowledge from his enemies and is willing to wield it under fire. In the book, the duel is not about Harry failing, but about him refusing to stop, even when hopelessly outmatched. That refusal is the essence of his dueling identity, an aspect the film leaves only in shadow. Another striking moment occurs in Deathly Hallows during the escape from Privet Drive. Harry, disguised by Polyjuice Potion, is thrown into aerial combat against Death Eaters. The film treats this as chaotic spectacle, brooms whizzing through clouds, yet the book shows Harry dueling mid-air with remarkable steadiness. He blasts spells back at pursuers, notices Hagrid's safety, and even recognizes Stan Shunpike under the Imperious Curse, choosing to disarm rather than kill. Rowling makes clear that Harry's instincts as a duelist are not only about survival, but also about his moral compass. He will fight fiercely but will not betray who he is. That dimension is lost in the rapid editing of the film, but in the book it makes the reader see Harry as a true Gryffindor who combines courage with conscience. The Battle of Hogwarts demonstrates the full evolution of Harry's dueling, and here the contrast between book and film is most dramatic. In the movie, his final confrontation with Voldemort takes place in the courtyard, reduced to two combatants throwing beams of light at each other until one falls. The book instead builds the climax in the Great Hall, with everyone watching and Harry using not just a spell, but words, strategy, and understanding. He explains why Voldemort cannot win, exposes the Elder Wand's true allegiance, and then casts the disarming spell, Expelliarmus. The spell choice is crucial. It is not brute force, but the mark of Harry's dueling style: disarm, improvise, and survive. This makes his victory not an accident, but the natural culmination of his years of fighting. The film misses the beauty of that choice, but the novel captures Harry's essence as a magical duelist who wins by being true to himself. What makes Harry compelling as a duelist in the books is his constant use of spells outside the expected. He does not rely solely on stunning spells or offensive curses. He uses shield charms, disarms enemies, conjures Patronuses, and in desperate moments even simple jinxes become weapons. During the battle in the Department of Mysteries, he uses reductor curses to shatter shelves of prophecy orbs, creating chaos as cover. He is never limited to a single tactic. The films, however, streamline these moments into repetitive flashes of Stupefy and Expelliarmus, erasing the inventive range that Rowling carefully illustrates. Harry's dueling is also tied to his relationships. In the book version of Order of the Phoenix, when Neville is injured, Harry shields him while continuing to fight. He yells at his friends to keep moving, not because he wants to lead, but because he cannot bear to lose them. These moments reveal that Harry duels not for glory, but for protection. The films often show him as the lone hero, but the novels make clear that his strength comes from fighting alongside others. His ability to endure, improvise, and press forward is multiplied by the presence of his friends, and that truth makes him distinct from Voldemort, who duels for domination. The films also underplay Harry's training. In Half-Blood Prince, the book highlights Harry's use of Sectum Sempra against Malfoy, a moment that shows his grasp of dangerous, improvised magic. This reveals that Harry is absorbing knowledge quickly, even recklessly, but with a duelist's hunger for survival. The movie shows the duel, but without the same depth of inner recognition, failing to capture the shock of Harry realizing the destructive potential of spells he barely understands. The book, in contrast, forces the reader to see him as a duelist in formation, learning not only spells but the moral limits of their use. Even minor duels reveal Harry's instincts. When Bellatrix Lestrange mocks him in the Department of Mysteries, the book shows Harry hurling curse after curse in blind fury while also shielding himself when possible. He is not simply a boy losing control, he is a duelist channeling raw grief into combat, barely keeping himself from crossing into the unforgivable. The films touch the surface of this but lack the emotional detail that makes Harry's fighting style so deeply human. His dueling is not detached elegance but the messy collision of rage, love, fear, and survival. Rowling also emphasizes Harry's physicality in duels, something the films rarely convey. He dodges, rolls, scrambles, and sometimes wins by sheer movement. In the book's dueling club, when Malfoy conjures a snake, Harry does not simply freeze. He reacts, and though misunderstood, his Parseltongue ability emerges as part of the duel. In the films, this scene is compressed into a single image of Harry speaking to the snake, but in the book, the duel is richer, showing how even chaos becomes a stage for Harry's instincts. This detail makes him less of a cinematic icon and more of a flesh-and-blood fighter who survives by every means available. Finally, what binds all of Harry's dueling in the books is his refusal to surrender. In every battle, from the graveyard to the Great Hall, he faces opponents stronger, older, and more skilled. Yet he continues to fight. The films often simplify this into destiny or luck, but the novels insist on showing the grit, the sweat, the bruises, the reckless charges, the shouted spells, and the last-minute improvisations. Harry is not a polished duelist, but a survivor who turns magic into the language of resilience. He fights because he must, and he endures because he refuses to let darkness win. That is the Harry Potter of the books. A boy who became a duelist, not by training, but by courage, instinct, and an unbreakable will. Number 20, the image of a living boy. Of all the images that the Harry Potter story gave the world, none is more contested than Harry himself. In the films, he often appears polished, calm, and framed by the camera as if he were a legendary hero already aware of his role. Yet the books insist on something different. J.K. Rowling crafted a boy who is inconsistent, emotional, vulnerable, and sometimes selfish. The contrast is not small. It shapes the way generations of readers and viewers think about what it means to grow up under the weight of destiny. Watching Daniel Radcliffe's Harry on screen, one often feels that the boy is already trained to be a savior. While reading the novels, one sees a child stumbling through chaos, learning by mistakes, and carrying scars that are not always visible. One of the clearest examples of this gap comes in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. In the book, Harry is consumed by anger after the events at the Ministry of Magic and the loss of Sirius Black. Rowling shows him lashing out at Ron and Hermione, yelling at Dumbledore's army and breaking things in frustration. "I don't care!" he shouts in the Gryffindor common room, unable to control the rage burning inside him. The reader sees a boy overwhelmed by grief and fury. In the film, however, these eruptions are muted. His grief is present, but it is restrained, almost noble, and the messy, ugly process of mourning is softened into cinematic dignity. A boy who screams and breaks apart is harder to contain in a 2-hour movie, but it is that loss of rawness that removes much of Harry's humanity. The books also show Harry's envy, a quality that hardly appears on screen. Early in Goblet of Fire, when Harry's name comes out of the goblet, Ron does not believe he entered fairly. Rowling writes, "Ron's still not talking to you." I hate being poor. In those tense weeks, Harry is bitter, sulking, and angry at his friend for not supporting him. He thinks of Ron's jealousy with his own resentment. Why can't Ron understand? The reader can almost feel Harry's loneliness deepen. In the film adaptation, this quarrel is shown but simplified. The conflict seems short-lived and almost childish, while in the novel it cuts deeply into Harry's heart. showing how even a hero can struggle with feelings of betrayal and envy. That sharp, uncomfortable bitterness is exactly what makes the book's Harry real. Rowling's Harry also jokes in ways that never reach the screen. In Prisoner of Azkaban, after Ron shouts that Scabbers the rat has vanished, Harry responds with biting humor. Maybe he's hiding in the girls' dormitory? These sarcastic lines give him a personality that is more than a solemn boy with a scar. The films, however, push comic relief toward Ron and Hermione, leaving Harry mostly serious. By doing so, the movies shape him into a traditional central figure, noble, quiet, and focused. But that simplification erases the moments where he feels like a real teenager who mocks, laughs, and enjoys irony, even when facing danger. Another major difference lies in Harry's mistakes. In the novels, he often makes choices that backfire. In Chamber of Secrets, his suspicion of Draco Malfoy drives him to steal ingredients for Polyjuice Potion and sneak into Slytherin, an act that ends in chaos. In Order of the Phoenix, his decision to rush to the Department of Mysteries, convinced Sirius is in danger, leads directly to Sirius's death. Rowling does not protect him from error. Instead, she shows that mistakes are part of growing up. The films soften the edges. Harry's decisions often seem more justified, his errors less his fault. In cinema, the boy with the scar is a brave soldier led astray by circumstance, but in the books, he is a fallible human who sometimes ruins everything despite his best intentions. The emotional depth of Harry's fear also separates the two portrayals. In Goblet of Fire, before facing the Hungarian Horntail, Harry panics in the tent. He felt as though he was about to throw up. Rowling describes his racing heart, his desperate need to run. This fear grounds the scene in reality, a boy terrified of death but forced forward. In the film, fear is displayed in wide eyes and tense music, but the subtle inner collapse is missing. Cinematic Harry always looks braver, steadier, as though fear only brushes his shoulders. The raw panic that a 14-year-old boy would naturally feel when facing a dragon is dulled, and thus the complexity of courage, acting while terrified, is lost. Rowling's Harry also feels isolation far more strongly than the films show. In Order of the Phoenix, she spends chapters depicting Harry's frustration at being cut off by Dumbledore, left without letters from friends, and abandoned at Privet Drive. His loneliness drives him to paranoia and bitterness. "They don't want me to be part of it," he thinks. This gnawing sense of exclusion makes his later defiance understandable. In the film, this phase is condensed into a few minutes of brooding shots. The audience sees he is upset, but the intensity of his mental isolation, the true psychological torment, is never fully revealed. Without this, cinematic Harry becomes a simpler figure, annoyed, yes, but not truly desperate for connection. Perhaps the greatest proof of his humanity in the books is his tendency to argue with authority. In Order of the Phoenix, when Dumbledore avoids him, Harry explodes. "Look at me," he cries, demanding attention from the man he once trusted completely. Rowling forces readers to see a boy who challenges even the most powerful figures. In Half-Blood Prince, he defies Snape in class, shouts back at Scrimgeour, and refuses to play the obedient savior. In the films, some of this rebellion remains, but it is presented with less bite. He appears brave rather than insolent, respectful even when resisting. The boy who yells at Dumbledore with desperate fury is replaced by a protagonist who calmly questions authority, as though he were born to be a leader rather than struggling to understand betrayal. The books also show Harry's grief in ways that leave lasting scars. After Cedric Diggory's death in Goblet of Fire, Rowling describes Harry clutching Cedric's body, screaming, unable to process what has happened. His trauma lingers in his dreams and visions, painting a boy haunted. In the film, Cedric's death is shocking, but Harry's response is condensed into quick cries before the story moves forward. Trauma is turned into cinematic shock, not the long-term nightmare that it truly was. Readers carry Harry's grief with them because it feels like something lived, not staged. Even joy is different in the two portrayals. In the book Prisoner of Azkaban, when Harry first conjures a Patronus strong enough to drive away Dementors, he feels pure triumph. Rowling writes he had conjured the Patronus, he had seen it, the enormous silver stag. The moment bursts with relief, laughter, and pride. In the film, the scene is bathed in special effects, impressive and cinematic, but Harry's emotional release, the real catharsis of proving to himself he could do it, is overshadowed by spectacle. Book Harry's joy is infectious because it is deeply personal, while film Harry's triumph feels like another step toward inevitable victory. Another layer absent in the films is Harry's pettiness. In Half-Blood Prince, when Ron starts dating Lavender Brown, Harry watches Hermione's pain but also feels his own irritation at the couple's constant kissing. Rowling notes his annoyance, his desire for peace in the common room. These human irritations make him less a saint and more a teenager. In the films, such details are skipped or minimized. Harry stands apart from petty squabbles, leaving Ron and Hermione to embody the teenage drama. Yet that absence denies the truth. Harry was not only the boy who lived, he was also a boy who rolled his eyes at his friends, snapped at them, and wanted them to stop snogging already. Rowling even allows Harry to imagine revenge. In Order of the Phoenix, when Umbridge torments him, Harry fantasizes about using curses against her. Harry longed to strike her, to hurt her, to make her pay. These dark thoughts are part of his humanity. In the films, Harry opposes Umbridge with resistance, but the vengeful rage is not visible. Cinema cannot easily show the internal shadows without darkening the entire character. Yet it is precisely those shadows that remind the reader. This hero is not flawless. He carries anger that could turn him cruel, and the real victory is that he resists it. Another small but telling detail. In Deathly Hallows, when Harry digs Dobby's grave, Rowling lingers on his exhaustion, his tears, his hands bleeding in the dirt. He insists on burying the elf without magic, because here lies Dobby, a free elf. The act is messy, painful, but profoundly human. In the film, the burial is shortened into a quiet, beautiful image. It is poignant, but it lacks the physical suffering that makes Harry's grief and love for Dobby tangible. Readers remember his bleeding hands, the boy who chooses pain to honor a friend. Viewers see a polished farewell instead. The films often make Harry appear destined, almost saint-like, but the books resist that temptation. In Deathly Hallows, as he walks into the forest to die, Rowling shows his terror. He did not want to die. He was not going to be able to do it. The boy is terrified, crying, longing for life. His choice to continue is all the more powerful because it comes from fear, not calm heroism. In the film, the walk to the forest is silent, noble, almost serene. Harry looks like a martyr who accepts fate. The messy human truth that heroes are afraid and go forward anyway is polished away. By comparing these two versions, one sees clearly how the films sought to carve Harry into a symbol, while the books insisted he remain a boy. A symbol must be calm, brave, and focused. A boy can be jealous, sarcastic, angry, afraid, hopeful, and grieving all at once. Rowling's Harry is alive because he is imperfect. Cinema needed a savior. The page gave us a human being, and it is that human being with his mistakes and his tears who continues to live in the hearts of readers. Number 21, Harry and Hogwarts. In the films, Harry's arrival at Hogwarts is shown with sweeping shots of the castle, the grandeur of the Great Hall, and the moment of the Sorting Hat, but it often feels like a backdrop for the adventure. In the books, however, this first journey is drenched in meaning. When Harry first sees the castle across the Black Lake, the text lingers on his oar. The narrow path had opened suddenly onto the edge of a great black lake. Perched atop a high mountain on the other side, its windows sparkling in the starry sky, stood a vast castle with many turrets and towers. For Harry, who had spent 11 years in a cupboard under the stairs at number 4, Privet Drive, this is not just a school, it is a miracle. The film shows a boy seeing a castle. The book shows a child discovering his first home. Once inside the castle, the films move briskly to highlight classes, friendships, and conflicts. But in the books, Harry is captivated by every hallway, every staircase that shifts under his feet. The text breathes life into Hogwarts as a character in its own right. Corridors are described in detail, lined with suits of armor that sometimes move, portraits that gossip and scold, and staircases that confound even experienced students. Harry does not simply walk through the castle, he absorbs it. He learns its quirks, feels its moods, and senses that the ancient stones themselves are guardians of his new life. The films rarely capture this intimacy, presenting only glimpses of classrooms or hallways that lead him to the next plot point. The Great Hall, for example, becomes a central symbol of belonging in the books. Harry is astonished by the enchanted ceiling, a velvety black ceiling dotted with stars, and he feels the warmth of food and laughter that were absent in the Dursley household. This is where he first experiences Christmas with joy rather than loneliness, waking to find gifts at the foot of his bed and feasting alongside Ron and Hermione. The films show these moments, but they pass quickly, reducing the Great Hall to a setting for important events. In the books, every feast carries emotional weight. Each Christmas, Halloween, and end-of-year banquet is described in such mouth-watering detail that the reader feels Harry's gratitude for a table that is finally his. Hogwarts also becomes Harry's sanctuary during summers away. The films only briefly hint at this longing, often skipping straight to his return, but in the books, his heart aches for the castle while trapped at Privet Drive. In the Chamber of Secrets, Rowling writes, "He missed Hogwarts so much it was like having a constant stomachache." This sentence alone reveals the depth of his attachment. Hogwarts is not just a school, it is the antidote to the cold neglect of the Dursleys. Each time he is forced to leave, Harry suffers the loss of his only true home. The movies, eager to move the story along, overlook this pain, leaving viewers unaware of how deeply Harry identifies with the castle. The friendships he forms within Hogwarts walls are shaped by the intimacy of shared spaces. In the Gryffindor common room, Harry finds comfort by the fire, laughter with Ron and Hermione, and the sense of being surrounded by equals rather than tormentors. The films show the common room, but rarely linger on the small, ordinary evenings when Harry plays chess with Ron or shares sweets from honeydukes. These moments, abundant in the books, emphasize that Hogwarts is not just a place of danger and lessons, but also a haven of everyday joy. For Harry, the crackling fire and red and gold hangings are symbols of safety that no film montage can fully convey. The castle itself actively shapes Harry's adventures, offering him secrets and mysteries to uncover. In the Philosopher's Stone, he and his friends stumble across the third-floor corridor, and Fluffy, the three-headed dog, because Harry is constantly wandering, exploring, and learning the geography of his home. In The Prisoner of Azkaban, the Marauder's map is not just a magical object, it is a key that deepens his relationship with the castle, teaching him its secret passages and hidden rooms. The films highlight these discoveries as plot devices, but the books depict Harry's thrill in unlocking the secrets of the place he loves. Hogwarts is alive, and Harry is desperate to learn its every heartbeat. Quidditch is another part of Hogwarts that carries emotional weight for Harry in the books. On the surface, it is a sport, but to Harry it is a declaration that he belongs. The films reduce the matches to brief spectacles, flashy sequences of broomsticks and bludgers. Yet the books dwell on Harry's feelings of flying. In that moment, Harry felt he could do anything at all. This was the best feeling he had ever had in his life. Quidditch gives him confidence and pride, gifts the Dursleys had denied him. The roar of the crowd shouting his name tells Harry that Hogwarts accepts him as one of its own. and every victory strengthens his bond with the castle. The library and classrooms, too, are painted with loving detail in the books. Hermione drags Harry and Ron into the dusty, restricted section where ancient tomes whisper secrets, and Harry spends hours studying spells he barely understands but loves to attempt. In the films, the library is a dim backdrop for a single chase scene with Filch, yet in the books, Harry treasures the discovery that he can learn, that knowledge itself is power. Potions with Snape, transfiguration with McGonagall, and defense against the dark arts with Lupin all carry not just lessons, but emotional currents. Lupin's class, in particular, represents Harry's first brush with a teacher who genuinely cares about him, linking education to love and protection. These nuances, rooted in Hogwarts classrooms, vanish in the visual medium. The ghosts of Hogwarts add another layer of personality to the castle. Nearly headless Nick, the Bloody Baron, and the Grey Lady are not just spooky figures in Rowling's text, they are guides, gossipers, and sometimes allies. Harry learns pieces of the castle's history from them, uncovering stories that stretch back centuries. This connection between the boy and the ancient spirits of Hogwarts enriches his sense that he is part of something larger than himself. The films, however, reduce these figures to background humour, or omit them altogether, erasing the way Harry grows closer to his new home by learning about its past. Even punishments at Hogwarts strengthen Harry's relationship with the school. In the Philosopher's Stone, when he is sent into the Forbidden Forest with Hagrid, he confronts danger but also discovers a sense of awe at the magical creatures living nearby. The Forbidden Forest terrifies him, yet he respects it as part of the Hogwarts world that belongs to him now. In contrast, the films present the forest as a set piece of peril, never exploring how even fear ties Harry to the castle. These experiences show that Hogwarts nurtures him in every way, through wonder, through friendship, and even through trials. The Room of Requirement, introduced in the Order of the Phoenix, epitomizes Hogwarts' role as a living companion to Harry. The castle provides exactly what he needs, a secret, safe place to train Dumbledore's army. Rowling describes it as a room that reshapes itself for the student who enters, symbolizing how Hogwarts itself cares for Harry. The film portrays it as a convenient hidden chamber, but misses the deeper message. The castle is watching, adapting, and protecting its own. For Harry, this reinforces the sense that Hogwarts is not just bricks and mortar, but a friend. Seasonal changes in the books deepen Harry's emotional connection. Rowling paints autumn leaves swirling on the grounds, winter snow glittering across the castle, and springtime blossoms brightening the lawns. Harry marvels at the shifting scenery because it is the first time he has a place to call home across the cycle of a year. Christmas at Hogwarts, described with magical snow, decorated trees and warm fires, makes him feel like he belongs to a family. The films show festive decorations, but without Harry's inner joy, they fail to communicate how each season cements his love for the castle. In the books, leaving Hogwarts each summer is heartbreaking for Harry. Rowling emphasizes the emptiness he feels boarding the train back to Privet Drive, watching the castle fade from view. In The Goblet of Fire, Harry clings to the thought of Dumbledore's words as comfort for the months away. This longing reinforces that Hogwarts is his true family, while the Dursleys are merely a prison sentence. The films never dwell on this grief, glossing over the summers as unimportant interludes. Without these details, viewers cannot understand how deeply Harry's identity is tied to the castle itself. By the final book, The Deathly Hallows, the bond between Harry and Hogwarts is unbreakable. When he returns to the castle to fight Voldemort, it is not just another battlefield. It is his home that he defends, the place that gave him a family and a purpose. The castle rises to protect him in turn, statues leaping to life, teachers standing in solidarity, and friends joining his side. The films capture the spectacle of the battle, but miss the intimacy of Harry's emotions. To him, protecting Hogwarts is no different from protecting his own heart. The books make this clear. Without Hogwarts, Harry would never have become who he is. Hogwarts in the films is undeniably beautiful, an iconic castle that dazzles the eye, but in the books it is alive, breathing, and loving. For Harry Potter, it is the first and only true home he ever knew, the family he was denied, and the heart of his story. Each corridor, each portrait, each shifting staircase is more than decoration. They are the threads of belonging. This is why when readers think of Harry Potter, they do not only remember the battles or the spells, they remember the boy who stepped into a castle and found his family at last. Number 22, Harry and Snape. Severus. Snape's presence in the books is overwhelming, uncomfortable, and constant. From the very first lesson in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, J.K. Rowling frames him not as a neutral teacher, but as a force of intimidation and injustice. The scene where Snape singles out Harry in front of the entire class is written with almost theatrical cruelty. Snape mocks him with, "Tell me, what would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood?" Harry, a child new to the magical world, is humiliated before he can answer. This moment establishes a deep hostility that never leaves Harry's perception of Snape. In the films, however, this opening tension is softened. Alan Rickman's portrayal, though brilliantly controlled, lacks the raw venom of the book's words. Instead of searing humiliation, the audience sees stern discipline, a tone of sarcasm rather than the merciless bullying Harry experiences on the page. The books make it clear that Harry's resentment of Snape is not just about bad teaching, it grows from an emotional wound that deepens with every slight and every insult aimed at his father. In The Prisoner of Azkaban, the tension reaches a breaking point when Snape sneers at James Potter's memory, describing him as arrogant and reckless. Harry's response is written with white-hot anger. "He was the best friend I ever had," he shouts at Snape, unable to contain his fury. This scene is crucial because it shows Harry defending not only his father, but also his entire identity. The films touch on this conflict briefly, but the sting of those words is blunted. The confrontation is reduced to passing comments rather than the emotional explosion that defines Harry's struggle to reconcile his father's image with Snape's bitter version of the truth. What Rowling crafts so carefully is the duality of Harry's perspective. He despises Snape's injustice, but is also haunted by the idea that Snape may see something of James in him. In The Order of the Phoenix, when Snape sneers that Harry is just like your father, strutting about the place, Harry is torn between pride and rage. The insult cuts deeper than any detention because it reduces James to a caricature. On the page, readers see Harry's thoughts spiraling, his need to defend his father battling with the unsettling suspicion that Snape might not be entirely wrong. The why films flatten this inner conflict. We see Harry scowl, but the audience is not allowed into his inner turmoil, and the weight of that generational tension is lost. The books also insist on the raw unfairness of Snape's favoritism toward Slytherin students. The recurring detail that Snape deducts points from Gryffindor for the smallest offences while ignoring or rewarding worse behaviour from his own house creates a rhythm of bitterness in Harry's school life. It builds a sense of siege, of Harry constantly fighting against not only Voldemort but the very authority that is supposed to guide him. In the films, these biases appear as light touches of humour, an eye roll from Hermione, a sigh from Harry, rather than the relentless grind of injustice Rowling describes. The books turn Snape's classroom into a battlefield where Harry feels unprotected, even targeted, and that transforms their relationship into something far darker than the films suggest. Perhaps the greatest chasm between page and screen lies in the memories Harry witnesses in The Order of the Phoenix. The pensive scene where he sees James tormenting Snape is devastating. Harry feels shame at his father's cruelty, a shame that gnaws at him through the entire book. Rowling writes Harry's reflection vividly. Harry had never hated James more than he did at that moment. The irony is staggering. Harry, who spent years defending his father's memory against Snape's accusations, suddenly sees Snape's pain firsthand. It is a turning point in his perception, a moment where hatred begins to shift into reluctant understanding. The films compress this sequence so heavily that the emotional complexity evaporates. The bullying appears as a brief flashback, leaving audiences with only a faint sense of discomfort rather than the deep rupture it causes in Harry's self-image. Snape's cruelty is not softened in the books, but it is always contrasted with his hidden acts of protection. In the Philosopher's Stone, it is Snape who counteracts Quirrell's jinx during the Quidditch match, though Harry believes the opposite. Rowling masterfully plants these contradictions, forcing the reader to hold two truths. Snape is both the tormentor in class and the unseen guardian in the shadows. This duality makes the final revelation of Snape's loyalty in the Deathly Hallows all the more tragic. The films hint at these moments, but rarely dwell on them, often making Snape's protection seem incidental rather than deliberate and constant. The climax of their relationship comes in the shrieking shack of the prisoner of Azkaban. Here, Snape's hatred boils over when he confronts Sirius Black, but Harry's intervention reveals the tangled web of loyalties. Snape is knocked unconscious by Harry, Ron, and Hermione, but his unwavering attempt to protect them, however misdirected, underscores his complex role. Rowling describes Harry's shock at realizing that Snape, for all his venom, was willing to risk everything. The films once again narrow the scene, reducing the confrontation to action rather than emotional revelation. The subtle shift in Harry's understanding of Snape is never fully realized. On screen, the tragedy of their relationship reaches its peak in The Half-Blood Prince. Harry's obsession with Snape's apparent betrayal of Dumbledore consumes him. He spends the entire book watching, waiting, convinced that Snape is plotting in the shadows. The moment Dumbledore dies at Snape's hand is shattering because it seems to confirm every suspicion Harry ever had. Rowling captures Harry's anguish with brutal precision. The man he had trusted most, Dumbledore, was gone, and the man he had hated most, Snape, had killed him. The betrayal is personal, a knife twist in a wound that has been open for 6 years. The films capture the spectacle of the death, but not the intricate history that makes it unbearable. The audience sees murder, but the readers feel decades of hatred, collapsing into a single moment of despair. When the truth finally emerges in the Deathly Hallows, it reshapes not only Harry's view of Snape, but the reader's as well. Snape's memories reveal his enduring love for Lily Potter, his promise to protect her son, and his lifelong penance for past mistakes. The line, "Look at me," spoken as he dies, is no longer the command of a cruel teacher, but the plea of a man who wants to see Lily's eyes one last time. Rowling's words recast years of conflict in a single, devastating gesture. The films include this scene, and Alan Rickman delivers it with haunting beauty, but the groundwork, the years of venom, the weight of Harry's hatred, the echo of James's ghost, is far thinner than in the books. The cinematic moment becomes tragic, but it lacks the layered complexity that makes it almost unbearable on the page. Harry's final act of respect, naming his son Albus Severus Potter, carries extraordinary weight in the novels because it represents forgiveness and reconciliation. Harry acknowledges that Snape, despite his cruelty, was the bravest man he ever knew. This is not a simple tribute, it is a confession that Harry misunderstood him for most of his life. The films present this moment almost sentimentally without the painful history that makes it profound. The audience is left with a tidy resolution, while the books leave readers with the ache of years wasted in hatred that could never be undone. Rowling's narrative insists on complexity. Snape is not redeemed in the sense of becoming good, nor is Harry wrong for hating him. Both feelings coexist. Harry's hatred was justified by Snape's cruelty, but Snape's cruelty was fueled by wounds Harry never saw. This contradiction is the heart of their story, and it is what gives the novels their tragic force. The films, constrained by time and tone, simplify this relationship into sternness versus defiance, robbing the story of its full depth. Specific details, like Snape's constant insults about Harry's fame, are minimized on screen. In the books, the repeated jeers about Harry's arrogance sting because Harry does not see himself that way. He struggles constantly with the burden of celebrity, and Snape's words reinforce his insecurities. Rowling uses these small humiliations to build a psychological war between them. The films reduce them to moments of dry humor, making Snape seem more like a grumpy teacher than an antagonist who shapes Harry's inner struggles. The irony of Snape's role as a teacher is another theme richer in the books. He was tasked with guiding young witches and wizards, yet he often crushed their confidence. For Harry, this dynamic meant growing up under the shadow of a man who despised him, but who was also the only person standing between him and death. It is a paradox that the books explore relentlessly. In the films, Snape's lessons are presented as cold but not devastating. The balance of pain and protection, which is the essence of Harry's relationship with Snape, is never fully expressed. The novels ensure that Snape and Harry's story is not one of simple enmity, but of tragic misunderstanding. Every cruel word and every act of hidden protection contribute to a relationship that is both toxic and essential. Their conflict is not minimized but expanded until it becomes one of the central arcs of the saga. The films, while visually striking and emotionally powerful in moments, simply cannot capture the grinding bitterness, the generational trauma, and the final, devastating revelation that make Harry and Snape's relationship one of the most unforgettable tragedies in modern literature. Number 23. Harry and Love. Harry's journey through adolescence was never just about fighting Voldemort. It was also about awkward first crushes, heartbreak, and learning what love actually feels like. In the books, J.K. Rowling carefully shaped Harry's inner world, revealing his insecurities and emotions in a way that made him human and relatable. The films, however, often stripped away these subtleties, reducing his relationships to fleeting gestures and shallow encounters. This contrast becomes most striking when we look at Harry's story with Cho Chang and Ginny Weasley. The books capture the turbulence of teenage affection with jealousy, confusion, and nervous excitement, while the movies present only shadows of those emotions. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, Cho Chang became the center of Harry's first romance. The book portrays him as overwhelmed by feelings he barely understands. After Cedric Diggory's death, Cho is torn between mourning her boyfriend and being drawn to Harry, and the boy himself is both nervous and elated to have her attention. One of the most telling passages comes when Rowling writes, Harry could not help himself talking a lot about the Triwizard Tournament every time Cho was near, as if Cedric's glory was his own. Order of the Phoenix, Chapter 18. This small line captures his insecurity, his clumsy attempt to impress her, and the immaturity of his first crush. The film adaptation condensed this into a few lingering looks and one kiss in the Room of Requirement, stripping away the complex mixture of grief and affection that made their connection so fragile. The awkwardness of their first kiss in the book remains one of the most endearing glimpses into Harry's teenage heart. Rowling describes how Cho begins to cry as soon as their lips meet, leaving Harry completely bewildered. He later confides in Hermione and Ron, who explain that Cho's grief and affection are colliding in ways she cannot control. Harry's confusion is genuine. She was crying while we were kissing. I don't know what I did wrong, he admits in the book, Order of the Phoenix, Chapter 21. This moment is essential because it reveals Harry not as the chosen one or a famous Quidditch player, but as a teenage boy who simply doesn't know what to do. The movie, however, transforms this delicate moment into a simple, almost cinematic kiss, avoiding the vulnerability of tears, confusion, and the uncomfortable silence that followed. Rowling continued to develop this relationship in ways that showed its immaturity and inevitable collapse. In the book, Harry grows frustrated when Cho becomes jealous of his friendship with Hermione. A pivotal scene happens at Madame Puddifoot's tea shop, where Harry experiences what many teenagers go through, a disastrously awkward date. Cho is upset, crying and angry, while Harry cannot find the right words to comfort her, distracted by his thoughts of Quidditch practice. Rowling paints the scene with painful honesty. Cho's hand was trembling slightly in Harry's, and she would not look at him. The Valentine decorations seemed to mock him with their sickly pink cherubs. Order of the Phoenix, Chapter 25. This entire sequence was cut from the film, and without it, Cho's story becomes flat, her emotional depth reduced to a brief subplot with no resonance. The collapse of Harry's relationship with Cho in the book is not sudden but gradual, built on misunderstandings, grief, and insecurity. It ends with hurt feelings, but it also leaves Harry with lessons about honesty, patience, and what he wants in a partner. In the film, this nuanced emotional journey is absent. Cho is given little screen time and their breakup is implied rather than shown. The audience never witnesses the important growth Harry undergoes. Learning that love can be messy and painful. By skipping these layers, the films rob viewers of the chance to see Harry as a vulnerable teenager navigating heartbreak. When it comes to Ginny Weasley, the difference between the books and the films becomes even more glaring. In J.K. Rowling's writing, Ginny is a fiery, independent character full of life and wit. She grows from the shy girl in Chamber of Secrets to a confident young woman admired by her peers. By the time Harry notices her romantically in Half-Blood Prince, the attraction is intense and undeniable. Rowling describes the moment Harry first realizes his feelings with precision. He suddenly realized that he did not want Ron to know how much he liked Ginny. Half-Blood Prince, Chapter 14. The secrecy, the guilt, and the forbidden nature of his emotions made his growing affection both thrilling and frightening. The films, however, reduced this arc to a few brief exchanges and an awkward shoelace-tying scene, robbing the romance of its electricity. The passion of Harry's feelings for Ginny is one of the great surprises of the later books. Rowling describes him being consumed with jealousy whenever Ginny is with other boys, particularly Dean Thomas. The thought of Dean and Ginny was like a sickness inside him. Half-Blood Prince, Chapter 14. This line reveals the intensity of Harry's emotions, showing him wrestling with feelings that are raw and overwhelming. In the books, Harry spends months silently struggling with this jealousy, trying to suppress it, and then finally giving in to the realization that he cannot ignore his feelings any longer. The films barely hint at this inner turmoil, flattening what could have been one of the most powerful storylines of Harry's adolescence. The moment Harry finally kisses Ginny in the book is explosive with relief and passion. It happens after a Quidditch victory, when the entire Gryffindor common room erupts in celebration. Without thinking, without planning it, without worrying about the fact that 50 people were watching, Harry kissed her. Half-Blood Prince, Chapter 24. The description captures his spontaneity, his loss of control, and the deep desire he had been suppressing for so long. This was not a calculated act, but an eruption of emotion. The film version, by contrast, portrays their first kiss quietly in the room of requirement, away from their peers in a subdued and almost muted manner. The thrill, the sense of release, and the pure joy of the moment are completely lost. Ginny's character also suffers greatly in the film adaptations. In the books, she is witty, sharp-tongued, and fearless. She stands up to Draco Malfoy, jokes with Fred and George, and shows remarkable independence. Harry's attraction to her is not just physical, but deeply rooted in admiration for her strength and spirit. Rowling makes it clear that Ginny is Harry's equal, someone who understands him and can match his courage. The films, however, silence her. She becomes a background figure with little dialogue or presence, which makes Harry's sudden attraction appear inexplicable to viewers unfamiliar with the books. The breakup between Harry and Ginny before the final battle is another key moment that the films underplay. In the book, Harry ends the relationship not because his feelings have cooled, but because he wants to protect her from Voldemort's wrath. "It's for some stupid, noble reason, isn't it?" Ginny says, understanding him perfectly, Half-Blood Prince, Chapter 30. This exchange is heartbreaking because it shows the depth of their connection. Ginny knows him so well, and Harry sacrifices his happiness out of love. The films, however, brush past this scene, reducing the emotional weight of Harry's sacrifice and Ginny's resilience. Taken together, Harry's relationships with Cho and Ginny in the books form a complete portrait of a boy growing into a man. With Cho, he learns about the pain of first love, the messiness of grief, and the difficulties of communication. With Ginny, he experiences passion, admiration, and the kind of love that makes sacrifice possible. These stages are critical to understanding Harry not just as a hero of prophecy, but as a teenager navigating the same struggles millions of readers could recognize. By leaving these nuances behind, the films created a version of Harry who seemed strangely detached from the ordinary pains and joys of adolescence. The films often prioritized action and spectacle over the quieter, more human moments. In doing so, they left out some of the most essential elements of Harry's character development. His emotions, his mistakes, his jealousies, and his desires made him relatable. Without them, the cinematic Harry feels incomplete. Rowling's Harry is not just the boy who lived, but the boy who fell in love, made mistakes, learned from heartbreak, and discovered what it means to care for someone deeply. The contrast between books and films becomes even more important when we remember that love is the central theme of the Harry Potter saga. From Lily's sacrifice to Harry's own willingness to die for his friends, love drives the story at every stage. Reducing Harry's personal experiences of love to a few quick kisses undermines that theme. In the books, his romantic journey is not a side note but a crucial part of his growth. Love is messy, complicated, and sometimes painful, but it is always real. Rowling gave us that truth in her writing, and it is what made Harry's story resonate so powerfully with readers around the world. Number 24. Harry and the Dark Side. In J.K. Rowling's novels, Harry Potter carries an invisible shadow that haunts him as much as Voldemort himself. This darkness is not simply a byproduct of trauma, but something woven into his very being from the night he survived the killing curse. Readers encounter it early on when Harry realizes he can talk to snakes in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Rowling frames this as a frightening revelation, one that makes Harry question his identity. "I am a Parselmouth. I can talk to snakes. I should have been in Slytherin." This moment crystallizes a deep unease, the possibility that his survival came at a terrible cost. Yet in the films, this revelation is flattened into a plot point, a curious skill rather than a terrifying clue that Harry might share Voldemort's essence. The book asks whether Harry is destined to become the very thing he fears, while the movie largely avoids dwelling on such unsettling reflections. As Harry grows older in the novels, Rowling continually forces him to confront his anger and darker impulses. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, his temper flares with such intensity that his friends begin to fear him. Harry shouts at Ron and Hermione, throws objects in Dumbledore's office, and even describes himself as wanting to hurt someone. The narrative is uncomfortably raw. "I don't want to be human," he bursts out after another painful vision. This is not the polished, heroic boy of the films. It is a portrait of a teenager carrying unbearable trauma and fearing that his mind is not entirely his own. By comparison, cinematic Harry appears moody, but he lacks the dangerous unpredictability that Rowling deliberately highlights to keep the reader uneasy about his future. Rowling also underscores Harry's disturbing connection to Voldemort through recurring visions. Each time Harry's scar burns, the reader senses that he is slipping into the Dark Lord's perspective against his will. When Arthur Weasley is attacked by Nagini in Order of the Phoenix, Harry experiences it through the snake's eyes. He was on the floor, his hands were scrabbling in vain at the snake to push it off. He tasted blood in his mouth. The scene is written in horrifying detail, placing Harry not as observer but as predator. This creates the terrifying possibility that Harry is no longer entirely separate from Voldemort. The films, however, sanitize these visions, reducing them to brief flashes of Voldemort's face or cryptic dream sequences. The viewer is not forced to sit in the unsettling intimacy of Harry's borrowed perspective, and the horror of his potential corruption is dulled. The books also make clear how deeply Harry fears the Sorting Hat's words in his first year. "You could be great, you know, it's all here in your head, and Slytherin will help you on the way to greatness." This suggestion never leaves him, and Rowling brings it back repeatedly as evidence that Harry's instincts and potential could align with darker paths. In Chamber of Secrets, he reflects bitterly, "So I should be in Slytherin. The Sorting Hat was right." The films mention this only in passing, treating the Hat's words as a curious anecdote rather than a lifelong source of inner turmoil. As a result, moviegoers lose the ongoing tension of Harry's fear. What if he was always meant to walk in Voldemort's footsteps? Even in his triumphs, Harry's victories in the novels often carry a sinister undertone. In Prisoner of Azkaban, when he casts the Patronus to save Sirius Black and his own past self, he feels an intoxicating power. The narration lingers on this sensation. 100 Dementors were swooping toward him. He raised his wand and shouted, "Expecto Patronum!" A huge silver stag erupted from the end of his wand, galloping across the lake. Yet Rowling carefully adds the detail that Harry thought he had seen his father, and for a moment believed in an almost divine strength within himself. That mix of power, longing, and illusion hints at how close he is to slipping into arrogance, a trait often tied to dark wizards. The film treats this as a beautiful, triumphant moment, complete with swelling music, losing the eerie ambiguity of Harry's fleeting intoxication with power. Perhaps the most striking example comes in Order of the Phoenix, when Harry nearly uses the Cruciatus curse on Bellatrix Lestrange. After Sirius falls through the veil, grief and rage consume him. Rowling describes the moment with brutal honesty. He meant it. He had never wanted to hurt anyone as much as he wanted to hurt Bellatrix now. The spell fails because, as Bellatrix sneers, "You need to mean them, Potter." Here the novel reveals Harry's frightening capacity for violence. He is not a saint. He has the desire to inflict suffering when pushed beyond limits. In the film adaptation, this scene is altered so drastically that Harry never even attempts the unforgivable curse. Viewers see a grieving but still morally untarnished hero, while readers are left shaken by the possibility that Harry is closer to the Death Eaters than he dares to admit.